I'm Mick, your host with the most. Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. And welcome to what we're calling today the DCEU MCU Daily. The main portion of this video is Spider-Man No Way Home Explained, and then we'll be talking about the DCEU. Black Canary may be crossing over to the Batgirl film, but Batgirl definitely kind of links in to the Black Canary movie limited series, and we'll be talking about that and potential Arrowverse and DCEU crossovers. But first, Spider-Man No Way Home Explained. I know what you're saying. Who are you to explain Spider-Man No Way Home to us? We know what's going on in this film. Basically, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are in this movie. Job done. So I'm not watching this video because you don't know anything more. But I do. Because those cameos, those appearances are just the tip of the iceberg. This is the Marvel Cinematic Universe's answer to the Flash movie, to Flashpoint. What is Flashpoint? Well, Jeff Johns' graphic novel Flashpoint poses a big question. Barry Allen lost his mother to murder, and his father was framed and put in jail for her murder. So Barry decides to go back in time and save her life, basically saving his parents' life in a kind of way. By doing this, he creates an alternate Earth 1 where Bruce Wayne is dead. Bruce's mother, Martha Wayne, becomes the Joker, and Thomas Wayne survives to be a dark, hateful, bitter Batman. And he spends time with him, and Thomas Wayne helps Barry to kind of put things right. It's a great movie, but it's beyond that, because you've even got an Atlantean kind of Themyscira war as well, which is great. You should really read that graphic novel, and the animated movie is great. So that's what Flashpoint is, and that's kind of what we're getting in Andy Muschietti's Flash movie. The motivations for doing Flashpoint for WB are to reboot the entirety of the DCEU. Why? Why is their motivation this? Because the DCEU from the very beginning has lacked consumer confidence. Now, I love most of the DCEU movies, especially the Snyder stuff, but the mainstream audience lack confidence in that franchise. So it's being rebooted and reframed to be more consumer friendly, if you like. So that's their motivations for doing that. But what is Kevin Feige's motivations for doing this Spider-Man No Way Home movie and leaking from the very beginning that Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire are going to be in this movie? Well, Kevin Feige has made an utter mess, a clusterfuck of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Aesthetically, Tom Holland looks and acts how Peter Parker acts in the comics when he's at school. It works. He was great in Captain America Civil War. That was his introduction, and it was great because the Russos were handling it. And what a shame the Russos didn't do the Spider-Man movies. You think that would have been a good idea? You think you would have left them after they finished their Infinity Saga to do that rather than allowing them to leave the franchise, Kevin? Maybe that would have been a good idea. So even though the two Spider-Man movies have made a lot of money, because the MCU isn't about good movies, it's about having Easter eggs, cameos, and crossovers, right? That's all it's about. That's why this franchise wasn't successful until the first Avengers Ensemble movie, written and directed by Joss Whedon. That's when everyone became obsessed with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that's a fact. It's undeniable. So, he's made a mess of it. What is all the talk about Spider-Man No Way Home? Is it Tom Holland? No. Even if you love Thomas Spider-Man, it's not, is it? That's not why everyone's pumped for this movie. It's because Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire are going to be in this movie. Because Mark Webb and Sam Raimi understood the Spider-Man comics and what this character is. Cast him properly, made great movies, and that's why everyone's excited. And we're not just going to see Tobey and Andy. We're going to see their villains. We're going to see Green Goblin, played by William Dafoe. And we're going to see Doc Ock from the Raimi universe as well. So it's very exciting for fans, and it's very exciting for me. I grew up on Spider-Man. It's just a shame you get an opportunity to bring Spider-Man into the MCU And he may be Spider-Man and Peter Parker, as I say, aesthetically, but the world around him simply doesn't work. You know, to have no Daily Bugle or Jameson in Spider-Man movies is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever seen. And now they're bringing Sam Raimi's version of all that. And that's great, but it's problematic. Now, a lot of people didn't like The Amazing Spider-Man and didn't like what Sony were doing with Spider-Man after the Raimi era, because Spider-Man 3 didn't work for the audience. I think it's okay. People didn't like it. People loved The Amazing Spider-Man but hated The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So Sony started to get this bad reputation. The kind of reputation WB have got with DC, you know, interfering with directors' visions. And this is what happened with Raimi's Spider-Man 3 and Mark Webb's Amazing Spider-Man 2. And I think even Andrew Garfield has kind of hinted towards this, hasn't he? So there has been this issue. So when the MCU and Sony, when Disney and Sony made this deal for them to use Spider-Man, everyone was very excited. I was concerned, but when I saw him in Civil War, I must admit, I thought, wow, this is off the fucking scale. I'm not saying this is better than Toby and Andy, but it works for the MCU. And the Russos got him spot on. But then the Russos weren't working on the Spider-Man movies, and it went fucking wrong. One of the things that does concern me about this film, it is the same people making it as the other two movies. And I've discussed this before. But let's explain Spider-Man No Way Home. Spider-Man No Way Home is going to do exactly the same thing as the Flash movie. After Spider-Man No Way Home, the MCU will never be the same again. This is the thing that opens up the doors of the multiverse. Now, you're saying the first thing we've seen to open up the multiverse is, of course, Loki. But the multiverse hasn't been opened up in that series. The multiverse is already there. Basically, let's call them the multiversal police, grab Loki, and they need him, basically. But it's a corrupt organisation, that's what we find out. And ultimately, Loki, you know, finds Kang, and the female Loki does something stupid, kills that Kang, which gives Kang what he needs to get into the multiverse and manipulate, because that Kang that gets killed was telling the truth. That he just wanted things to be in a balance, but there were other versions of him that wanted to conquer the multiverse, and this is what the female Loki has actually done. Not too smart, is she? Anyway, so that doesn't open up the walls of the multiverse. The multiverse are being policed in that series. What Spider-Man No Way Home does, like the Flash movie will do, it cracks the doors and windows open of the multiverse. And so we've seen in trailer 1 of Spider-Man No Way Home, we see that Doctor Strange is doing a spell for Peter, so everybody forgets that he's Spider-Man. But then he realizes that his friends will forget as well. He interferes, he interrupts Doctor Strange, he interrupts his concentration when he's doing the spell. Now, I'm only telling you what I saw in the trailer. I don't know if this is the way it's going to happen. It seems a bit light. I think the Flashpoint story is more compelling, isn't it? How basically the Earth is changed and there's an alternate version and all of that. Anyway, so according to this trailer, it's the interruption of the spell that fucks everything up, and this opens up the multiverse. Now, there's a line in the first trailer of Spider-Man No Way Home where what happens is it's Doctor Strange. He goes, "You're living, you're living two separate lives." Now, this is interesting. Could it be after the multiverse is opened up that he's not just being Spider-Man on his Earth, let's call it the MCU Earth 1, but he's also he's actually going to another Earth and being Spider-Man there? Maybe there isn't a Spider-Man there. Maybe that's how it starts, in the disagreements between Doctor Strange. But of course, he may meet a more nastier Doctor Strange on the other Earth. So as I say, part of the motivation of doing Spider-Man No Way Home for Kevin Feige is there was no kind of energy or anticipation for the consumer for this third Tom Holland Spider-Man movie. But they always wanted to tap into the multiverse as DC did. It's interesting and it's convenient how DC and Marvel are both tapping into the multiverse. I can exclusively reveal to you now, they've both been talking together. They are planning a crossover between the DCEU and the MCU. It's in development now. They know I think it's going to be by one writer-director. I'm not going to tell you who that is, but that's what I'm hearing. And it's in the planning and early development now. You won't hear of anything of this film probably for the next 2, 3, maybe even 5 years. But it's happening. That's the motivation, one of them, of opening up the multiverses, both in the DCEU and the MCU. But there's also so much potential for crossovers. And basically, the DCEU is going to make the whole multiverse canon. It won't just be the DCEU, that Earth, that's canon. After Flashpoint, the whole multiverse will be canon. So Brandon Routh's Superman, etc., etc., Michael Keaton's Batman, things like everyone's going to be canon. It's a bigger universe to tap into. But ultimately, what they could do as well, and you never know, already we've had Superman's name dropped. I've got a hot take for you, because that's a big hit no one's been talking about. We've heard Superman's name being dropped in Eternals. How about this, everyone? How about in Spider-Man No Way Home, it hints towards the DC universe, and in Flashpoint, it hits towards the Marvel Cinematic Universe. What do you think about that? How would you think about that? I think this is going to happen, baby. That's prediction number 1. So these are all the motivations. Opening up the multiverse just gives you more potential. It's not rocket science, is it? But the motivation for doing this, basically, Feige had a choice. Where do you open up the multiverse? Which film do you do it in? So they decided to do it in this film because it was an opportunity to bring Andy and Toby back. But that's not the only people that are going to be in this movie from pre-existing Marvel live action. Oh no, get ready everyone, because the DCEU's Flash movie is going to have nearly everyone who's ever been in a DC live action movie who can stand up and is still around. And this is what's going to happen in the MCU's and Sony's Spider-Man No Way Home. That's right. You could potentially see, I'm not saying this is definitely happening because some actors just won't be available and won't do it, but the potential is all of Bryan Singer's X-Men, or quite a lot of it. The original Fantastic Four. Whatever you can imagine, you may see in this multiversal movie, Spider-Man No Way Home, because they're breaking the walls open. Just like DC in Flashpoint will make the whole multiverse canon, that's what the MCU are doing. Why do you think that all of a sudden the Sony Marvel Cinematic Spider-Man universe and the MCU are pretty much doing crossovers, right? We saw the post-credit scene for Venom, Let There Be Carnage, right? So it's all opening up. And it opens up in this movie, Spider-Man No Way Home. So this is huge. And basically what this does is, it's a great test case for Flashpoint as well. Because if this isn't perceived well or received well, then DC and Walter Hamada can say, we may need to change a few things here. But we'll wait and see. I have no doubt that Kevin Feige, because Kevin Feige runs these movies, he really writes the outlines of these movies, and the director just says blue and, stare up in the sky. That's how it works. So Kevin Feige is a genius. He knows what he's doing. I don't think he's had a clue what he's doing with Spider-Man thus far. Maybe this was his plan all along. But it's interesting. So I would expect to see many, many cameos from different sides of Marvel live action from the past, present, maybe even the future. So this is a huge movie, and it's a very long movie. I think isn't this one of the longest MCU movies of all time? Now, the reason they leaked from the very beginning that Andy and Toby are going to be in this movie, it distracts you from everything else, and of course, it gets everyone excited. You should be excited for this movie, just like we're excited over at DC for the Flash movie. Now, I can't, as a DC fan and a biased DC stan, I can admit the hype for the Flash movie isn't on the same level as the hype for the Spider-Man No Way Home movie. And that's obvious, and that's undeniable, of course it is. But there will be hype for that movie, and I just hope it's a great movie. Spider-Man No Way Home is going to change the Marvel Cinematic Universe forever. But they're not telling you that. Because DC are doing the right things. They're telling you what the Flash movie is. Now, they're not really telling you what Spider-Man No Way Home is. It's a huge movie, and it's not just about these two little cameos from these iconic Spider-Man actors, there's a lot more going on in this movie. So Doctor Strange inadvertently opens up the multiverse. He makes a mistake in his spell. And this opens up, of course, a can of worms. Because right now I think we can say that Phase 4 has seemed very underwhelming. Black Widow, you know, the Marvel TV series on Disney Plus are all right, but they're nothing special. Let's admit it. I think Loki was okay. I think Shang-Chi was an okay movie. Definitely better than Black Widow. I enjoyed Eternals personally, but a lot of Marvel stans didn't. So that's a problem. So this movie really has to work. This movie has to explode Phase 4 with the excitement it's lacked thus far. So there's a huge exciting build-up for this movie. This movie will have a huge opening, whether people like the movie or not. It depends on how much people like the movie and go back to it to see what happens. So these are the motivations for both sides at DC and Marvel, why they're, tapping in to the multiverse. So it's very interesting. Of course, many people have said it's also very lazy and very cheap. It is a lazy way of doing things, but you know what? As a consumer, I can say this with my hand on my heart. At the end of the day, does it excite me that Spider-Man No Way Home is going to give me loads of Marvel live-action characters from different universes and different iterations? It excites me. Does it excite me that they're going to reboot the DCEU and bring something exciting to the table? These things are exciting for the consumer. Now, the motivation, of course, for the studios and these creatives is to make more money. Of course it is. But there's nothing wrong with that. As long as we're enjoying what we're seeing, they're allowed to make money. We're in a capitalist system. That's the way it works. We can't stop people making loads and loads of money. Some people suck us dry. That's how the capitalist system works. They gauge our excitement, do things that means we give them money, and that's how it works. Some people get rich off of other people, and it isn't a fair system, but it is the system. So you can call this multiverse strategy, both from Kevin Feige and Walter Hamada, as cheap. But don't underestimate one thing, as I spoke about earlier. There is a reason. Both of them are tapping into the multiverse at the same time. And you can be confident in your anticipation for an MCU and DCEU huge crossover. Not just one crossover, not just an Avengers versus Justice League movie. I'm talking about cameos and Easter eggs. Once the Flash movie happens, and once Spider-Man No Way Home happens, and it could happen in these movies, you will see the beginning of Easter eggs and cameos and crossovers from the MCU and the DCEU in both of these worlds. And it's going to blow your fucking minds. This is one of the motivations of tapping into the multiverse, the Flash movie, and Spider-Man No Way Home. So, as fans, we're going to have to get used to this. It's been Marvel versus DC for a very long time. But our beloved characters are going to be crossing over very soon. So the time for toxicity and hatred will have to stop. So I hope I've explained Spider-Man No Way Home to you. There are interesting motivations for it. It does go beyond Tobey's and Andy's anticipated appearances. I can't wait. But the main takeaway from this video you should gain, that this is the build-up to the multiverse being opened up on both sides, on DC and Marvel, to start crossing over both of these universes. And personally, I couldn't be more excited. It's DCEU time, right? So I've been told by multiple versions of my sources, not versions, but multiple amounts of my sources, that Black Canary will cameo in the Batgirl movie, and it will lead. The Batgirl movie will lead into the Black Canary movie or limited series or whatever they're doing. So what is happening here? So via what they're doing with Batgirl, they're trying to create this kind of mini, I suppose, kind of HBO Max kind of universe. You may even see a Blue Beetle crossover in the Batgirl movie, and maybe more chance of in the Black Canary movie. So all these kind of HBO Max DC properties will kind of cross over. I wouldn't say Peacemaker, because that's James Gunn's baby. But the other stuff, this is what you're going to see. You may even see some Green Lantern stuff as well. It's not a separate universe to the, the complete complexities of the DCEU, but what they're doing, what I've always said, you know, the worlds of DC, Walter Hamada wanted to call this franchise at first. This multiverse strategy will create worlds within worlds, and I think that's very, very exciting, and it'd be great to see Black Canary and Batgirl crossover in the Batgirl movie, and then Batgirl crossing over in the Black Canary series, limited series or movie, or whatever they're planning. So this is very, very exciting, I must admit. So do expect that in those HBO Max projects. It's expanding, it's getting more exciting, and comic book kind of live action content is getting more and more ambitious every day. Right, what is the future of the DCEU between the DCEU and Arrowverse? We've seen quite a few Arrowverse shows being cancelled. There are specific reasons for this because they're reframing what they're doing. Superman and Lois has changed everything because this is a show that's put Superman... It's given a version of Superman that a lot of the Superman consumers actually enjoy. Unfortunately, I still haven't completed the series because it's not available to me where I am. I was, in a naughty way, able to watch the first 5 episodes, say no more about that, but then I couldn't watch any more. So I still can't get it here, which is a big, big problem. Anyway, I will let you know when I can watch it, and then I'll review the whole season. Exciting. And very soon, season 2 starts. Anyway, there are big potentials for DCEU and Arrowverse crossovers, beginning with the Flash movie. I've already explained to you what Spider-Man No Way Home and the Flash movie actually mean, you know, between connections between the MCU and DCEU. But there's little connections to look forward to as well. And I think there will be multiple Arrowverse kind of crossovers and cameos and Easter eggs in the Flash movie. And you can get used to that in the future. Now, a lot of people in the past, when I've spoken about this excitedly, have kind of not been happy. I understand your trepidation. You're a bit suspicious about this. You don't like the Arrowverse. It's not the greatest of franchise, maybe for adults. I think maybe for younger people, people like it. I used to like the first few seasons of Arrow and the Flash, as I've said multiple times. I don't watch it anymore. But I think there's still great ways of, you know, doing great crossovers between Green Arrow, aka Stephen Amell, a version of the Batman, whatever Batman you want to use in that as well. There's so many things you can do. And what you can do is make sure that you're honest and, you know, honest and sincere about the versions of the characters as they've been built up in the Arrowverse and in the DCEU. But also, you can make it a little bit more adult. You can be, you know, you can mature up the characters. You can make it on a level. You can do these Arrowverse characters crossovers justice. Because they are much maligned characters, the Arrowverse characters. Unfortunately, you know, the CW gets a lot of hate because of what they've done. Because they started off with a great franchise. And I mean, Smallville was a big blue touch paper moment for the Arrowverse, of course. Without Smallville and its awesome epic successes, there would have been no Arrowverse. And expect to see Smallville cross over somewhat, I don't know how, in the Flash movie and in the future of the DCEU. But as I explained earlier, these are the motivations to do a multiverse strategy, both on both sides of the pond, whether it's the MCU or the DCEU. This is their motivations. It makes money. It makes sense, and that's why both sides are doing a multiverse strategy at the same time. It's so blatantly obvious, I'm surprised nobody else has noticed. And so Arrowverse and DCEU crossovers have a lot of potential. But it's already happened, hasn't it? Because surprisingly, on Crisis on Infinite Earths, Ezra Miller's Barry Allen and Grant Gusting's Arrowverse Barry Allen crossed over, and I don't think anyone can say it wasn't anything but awesome. And they will cross over again in the Flash movie. And as I say, this is the exciting thing about a multiversal strategy. Yes, it sounds cheap and lazy, and it means you don't have to make much of an effort, but you do actually. You still have to give these characters great platforms and great storytelling and great character development, so we enjoy it. I mean, it is easy to shove a popular character from different iterations from the DC and MCU universes and say, here they are, and that's all you have to do. But of course you have to do more than that. You want it memorable. You want it to make as much money as possible. So I think there's big potential between the Arrowverse and the DCEU crossing over. Now, I must admit, I'm asked all the time about Melissa Benoist's Supergirl. Will she cross over with the DCEU? It's interesting because on her own, she's actually a good Supergirl. If we were crossing her over with the DCEU, Alex Danvers and the rest of them would not be involved. There's no need for them to be involved. It would just be her. I would love to give Mel her own Supergirl movie. I think on her own, she would be great. Without this identical, political kind of aggression we get in entertainment now, it would be brilliant. I mean, she's a self-proclaimed feminist, and that's up to her. If she wants to fight for other women and girls, that's a good thing, right? As long as she's not going around hating on men and boring on about the patriarchy, which most of these people do. So nothing wrong with that. But what I want to see is some justice for Melissa Benoist's Supergirl, because the casting on its own is fucking fantastic. Some beautiful performances by this person. She really is a good actor. And it's just a shame that her character was mired with what they do on Arrowverse. So these kind of crossovers, she can cross over with so many characters. She could actually cross over with Henry Cavill's Superman. It would be fun. So do I think that Walter Hamada and Greg Berlanti are motivated to do something like that? Oh yes, baby. You better believe it. And they've been putting their heads together. And this is one of the motivating reasons why Supergirl was cancelled. This is not the end of Melissa Benoist's Supergirl by a long way. And she doesn't deserve to be cancelled. As I say, on her own, she was never, ever the problem. She's an amazing Supergirl. As I say, the Red Tornado episode, I mean, I still get, the hairs on the back of my neck stand up when I see her performance and the anger that she does in her performance. I mean, great artistry. She's brilliant. She's got a lot of potential and could be doing a lot of great stuff in the future away from DC, and not necessarily at Marvel, but doing something maybe indie or really heavy performance based. She's very, very good. She is at the end of the day. But I think they will use her in DCEU Arrowverse crossovers, and don't be surprised if you see her in the Flash movie. I think that's one I would love to see. Has to be done properly though, but this is the fun, as I say, of multiversal movies. So we are heading in the era of the multiverse. In a few weeks' time, we begin with Spider-Man No Way Home. Everyone's rightly excited for this movie because this movie is huger than you ever imagined. This movie is huger than a couple of previous Spider-Man cameos. It's bigger than that. This is just the tip of the iceberg, my friends. It is huge, as the Flash movie is huge as well. It doesn't just open up the multiverse for their own universes, it gives the potential for crossovers and Easter eggs and lots of other things with the MCU and the DCEU finally crossing over. You may get surprise crossovers in Spider-Man No Way Home, DC crossing over a little bit, and vice versa with the Flash movie. This could be something that has been in the works for a very long time, and if they do that, it's starting. So now you're kind of understanding why I wanted to do a Spider-Man No Way Home kind of video explaining it. I just wanted people to understand what you're going to see in December. And this is not just another MCU movie. This is not just another bite at the sandwich. You can see that Phase 4 has been a little bit drab and dull. But then introducing the multiverse and having all this potential in it basically injects some life back into the MCU and the DCEU, by the way. Because ultimately, superheroes are great, but there's only a certain amount of things you can do with them. The multiverse opens up a can of worms. Whether this will be successful or not, and let's be honest, there's a short-term success to this. Ultimately, people will be bored, sooner rather than later, but it is exciting for the time being. It does open up the potential of everything, and I'm personally very, very excited that we're going to get some DCEU and MCU crossovers. As I said, Superman being name dropped in Eternals wasn't just a one-off thing. They were literally throwing you breadcrumbs. They were giving you a clue that this is the future already, and you're going to see that future come to a reality in Spider-Man No Way Home and in the Flash movie. I would love to know what you think about all of this and what I've said in this video in the comments down below. I've really enjoyed doing this video. This has been the DCEU MCU Daily. I'm Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss this perfection. And I'll be back again tomorrow with maybe more DCEU and MCU Daily. It may just be a DCEU Daily. I haven't decided yet. Until then, goodbye.